The Committee on Oversight is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Singh.
Present.
Senator McMorrow.
Here.
Senator Geis.
Present.
Senator Palanki. Senator McBroom.
Here.
Senator Lindsay.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 members present. There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'll make a motion to excuse absent members without objection. The motion carries. At this time, I'll also entertain a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the March 5th meeting. So moved by Senator Geis. Hearing no objections, the minutes are adopted. Our hearing today is dealing with a couple of topics. The first being security, both of our personal data and then the access of data. One of the things that we've done here in Oversight, whether it's in this committee or in other committees, is discuss the impact that attacks on our departments, on our local governments have had over the years, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from our colleagues over at DTMB about the impact that cybersecurity continues to have here in the state. And as we were discussing that issue, I wanted to bring the concerns that I've been hearing on the national level about individual personal data at the federal level that's in various departments and how that is potentially being accessed under the new administration. And so we're here to hear some of that testimony, both on cybersecurity as it pertains to the state, but also hearing testimony on the impact that Michigan residents' private data might be having at the federal level. What I want to do is get a better understanding of what the risks are, what the questions are, and where we see this moving. I don't think today we're going to have any final answers on that. Obviously, a lot of the actions that are happening at the federal level are new, and they're not very transparent. And because they're not transparent, we don't really have a full understanding of where they lead. But I do think for many people in our country, there is a lot of concern about that. And so I'll specifically talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. I think as people know that quote-unquote department was established under executive order on January 20th, 2025. It doesn't have any congressional authorization or at this point or funding from a permanent congressional process. But we have seen the department moving forward in accessing data from a variety of federal departments which have not had their data accessed in that way before. And so I do think that there is concerns that Michiganders' data could be being accessed in a way that's inappropriate. And because some of this hasn't been transparent on what's being accessed, how it's being accessed, the safeguards that are often already in place at the federal level, if those are all being followed, I think there ends up being a significant amount of questions that are being asked. And so, one of the areas that I wanted to specifically address is DOJ as they gain access to different government IT systems. They have now had access to millions of data on federal employees, as well as the system that handles $6 trillion in payments to Americans on a regular basis. This initiative, from what I can see, hasn't followed all of the congressional and executive branch orders that have been in place. As many of us know, that there are provisions that are in the Internal Revenue Code, the Privacy Act, the Federal Information Systems Modernization Act, the E-Government Act, and the Administrative Procedure Act. And so those items are not always being followed consistently by this department, and that brings up concern for me. When you take a look at the different departments that DOJ has been able to access, they have accessed with the Social Security Administration databases of any holder of a Social Security number. And so obviously that has a lot of personal identifying information about us, our spouses, our dependents, our work history, our banking information. at DHHS at the federal level. They have access to all of the software and IT systems, as well as being able to look at the transfer remote access system at the Labor Department. At the IRS, again, they've asked for, and from my understanding, received databases for all individuals that have Social Security numbers who pay federal taxes. Also at CMS, there is the potential of those that are on Medicare having not only their Social Security number accessed, but also documentation of a variety of health care related issues. And so as we take a look at all those pieces, like I said, because DOJ has not been transparent to the public, I don't know what they're doing with some of that information, but as I was asking questions, we had a few people come forward and say, hey, we'd love to at least pose some questions and thoughts on what we see are the concerns that are happening out there. And as we learn more, if we need to bring this committee back to take a look at that, we will do so. So today, I'm going to ask for the first person to come forward is Kendall Joseph, and then we'll follow up with others.
Senators, so I'm a software engineer, so I'm going to speak about what's possible from a software engineer's perspective. I'm going to be talking about supercomputing with AI. To do AI, it's truly sort of the heart of the system that you need is a supercomputer. So I'm going to be talking about how DOJ is exploiting our digital systems using this capability. So the physical hardware that does the computing, it looks kind of like this. And if you're not familiar with a supercomputer, it's just like your computer. It just takes more power and can do more computations per second. The software itself that's key for supercomputing and AI in general that has really given us leaps and bounds of advantages in all kinds of fields is called the transformer. It comes from the field of machine learning, and the lesson that we learned is essentially how to convert all of our text-based data into numbers and thus then be able to compare things just with numbers. So we can take a piece of document and compare it and multiply it, divide it, all those kinds of things, and be able to gain insights and understanding just using the numbers. So again, it's the combination of a server plus this software that gives you the ability to do AI as we know it. So anybody with the means can do AI, right? I can do AI from my computer right here, right now. I have the same software right now. If you let me plug into any of your servers right here, right now, I can do all kinds of things. But the key thing that I would need is data, access to your information. That's the way that I can run those operations. Data, the way that we store it is and keep it safe is via layers of security. The key idea is to keep people out. Like I said, if you let me in with my eyes and my capabilities, there's a lot that I can do. So we invest a great deal in the infrastructure itself, and that infrastructure is in about 7 layers. There's the human layer that has to do with clearance. There's the perimeter security that has to do with ranged attacks. There's the network security that has to do with managing traffic. There's endpoint security that has to do with the pipes and streams of data, where they're ending up. There's application security that has to do with experiences. Imagine a pop-up, a fake button, things like that. And then there's the database security that has to do with recall, the writing and reading of information. All of that, security is in all those layers, is so that we don't have random people coming up to our critical assets. Just so you can visualize that, how much effort is put into this. This is an example of a server farm. Notice there are berms built up so people can't see what it looks like. There are trees in the way. All that is part of the design. There are fences. There's a guardhouse. There's reduced numbers of windows. There's walls. It goes even further. If you get inside, the servers themselves are kept in cages that are locked. This is a lot of effort that just has to do with keeping specific people out, people that we don't know, people without clearances. Like I said, it's software and hardware. So that hardware, if you've ever seen anything like this, the server I just saw you, just turn it up on its side. You can keep it on a shelf like a library. This is the modern day library. This is how we keep track of our data and information. So what can you do with that transformer and server? What's an AI task that's common? AI is really good at transforming things. Like I said, you could turn text to numbers. You could turn a circle to a triangle. And why that's helpful for everyone is that, for example, if I only work with triangles and all I see in front of me is circles, what I need to do is transform those things into triangles I can understand. If we want to turn that into something a little bit more mathematical and a little bit more specific, if you're dealing with a whole bunch of COBOL, which is the language that our finances are written in, it's where all the operations are stored, it's where the logic is stored for how those transactions take place. If I don't understand it, I'm not an expert at it, for example, I can transform that into a language I do understand, something like Python. I could then go from that target language that I do understand and then transform it again into business logic, literal words that I can say and descriptions of what's happening in the code. If you think about imagine like a hypothetical situation, say I take the Constitution and I transform that into haikus, because let's say that I am not a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer, right? But let's say I am a poet. Right? So what I can do is I can transform the Constitution into poetry I can read and understand, and then I can inject new lines and new ways to talk about it. And that gives me the ability to do a particular kind of exploit called a backcast. And what that is, I could say, like, you know what, I don't understand what the Constitution is, but I do understand things like poetry, so I can insert lines into that poetry and then transform that into a kind of legal jargon, then transform that into a kind of business description, into software I understand, into software I don't understand. And if I have read and write abilities, which right now they're limited to read abilities, but you can go pretty far without it, and I can put that on the hardware that I install into the server farms that I was given access to. So there's a huge list of flaws associated with this, and it's just like playing a game of digital telephone, right? There's the lossiness in how those endpoints will continue to connect, and the list goes on. It's a lot that can happen. Just again, think of it like a long game of telephone. Every single transformation causes some little set of loss, and what I can do with that is essentially try and package all that expertise and speak as if I know what I'm talking about, down to the last detail. But it's really no replacement for true expertise on the ground, and every AI expert knows this. It's all about the data that you have. That's it. If you want to have a sense of what all these sources are, right, these come from people on the ground, people who are living through this, people who are in these data centers and in these places, seeing these breaches take place. And they are causing all kinds of havoc in their lives. They've written about them. Here's a couple posts in the Atlantic about the hardware breaches taking place, software breaches taking place, logical breaches taking place, because again, just because I transform it doesn't mean I truly understand why it's there, all the legal jargon that took place to even get those software adjustments there. And the expertise itself, the general volume of information that they're dealing with is a whole lot, right? Like it's $6 trillion. That's a lot of transactions. So put that all together. That's the nature of the exploit. Again, it's playing digital telephone, and there's just so much loss and so much risk involved.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions? Senator McMorrow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. Your presentation was fascinating, and I wonder for the average person thinking about how this might impact them. We've already seen news coverage of some of these very young employees who have not worked in government before suddenly being able to access systems, and people may have been fired and then fired accidentally and unfired. Thinking about the amount of information that the federal government has on each of us related to credit scores, related to loans we may have taken out, student loans. Can you just talk a little bit, even in an abstract, about some of the impacts this might have on some of our constituents who are worried about the amount of information the Treasury has, for example, and how that might impact their life if somebody is able to, even through read access or being able to violate a court order and suddenly have write access, what that could mean for somebody?
Yeah, there's easiest thing to do would be to train a model using that information. What that means is to use one of those same transformers to take that information to then be able to simulate and create information like what we have. Why that matters is then you can do things like forecast to say like, look, here's your buying patterns. I can simulate 100,000 people just like you that follow your same buying patterns, and then be able to interject like essentially disturbances and disruptions to try and figure out how it can change your buying patterns. So AI is still a big science here, right? And this is how, for example, advertising works, right? We do a whole lot of digitizing in order to then do all these simulations. So what Doge doesn't have, and really, which is just, it's been securely put away, is the ability to know down to the last detail the nature of our transactions. And once you actually have access to that full detail, then your simulations can become more accurate, and so can your exploits. So that would be the thing to worry about.
All right, thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Professor Hillary Allen from American University on Zoom. And just give us 1 second as we're making a change here and getting you on the screen. All right, Professor Allen?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So Chairman Singh, members of the Senate Oversight Committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Hillary Allen, and I'm a professor of law at the American University Washington College of Law, although my remarks are my own and should not be attributed to my institution. I teach courses in corporate law and financial regulation, and much of my research focuses on financial technologies and stability. I'm also the author of the book Driverless Finance, FinTech's Impact on Financial Stability. So I understand that I've been invited here today to discuss the implications for Michigan residents of DOJ's access to the federal government software systems. I will start with some background facts drawn from reporting cited in the written testimony that I've submitted to this committee. According to that reporting, DOJ has been able to access the IT systems of at least 20 federal government departments and agencies. According to Wired magazine, information access from these systems may include federal workers' tax records, biometric data, and private medical histories, such as treatment for drug and alcohol abuse. It may include the cryptographic keys for restricted areas at federal facilities across the country. It may include the personal testimonies of low-income housing recipients and granular details on the locations of particularly vulnerable children, just to give you a flavor. Many people have raised concerns about privacy and identity theft risks associated with DOJ's activities, including the presentation we just heard. But my remarks today will focus instead on the dangers of tinkering with complex systems, with a particular focus on the Treasury Department's payment system. According to Nathan Tankus, 88% of government payments, which amount to about $5.4 trillion, flows through one Treasury Department payment system every year and into the wider economy. If anything happened to this system, the payments would not go out, and that would lead to catastrophe. It could also lead to an unintentional operational default on United States Treasury securities. The mantra of move fast and break things may work for the development of a social media platform, but it is an entirely unsuitable and dangerous approach to operating the government. As Axios has reported, in the government, major IT modernization decisions are typically made through a lengthy interagency process where officials get feedback and weigh the benefits and consequences of such decisions. DOJ employees have the potential to break things when they make rash changes to software systems they are not familiar with. For example, although it has been denied by the Treasury Department, Nathan Tankus has received confirmation that the 25-year-old former ex-engineer Marco Eles was given the ability to not only read the software code of the Treasury payment system, but also to change it. Changes to the code may inadvertently introduce security vulnerabilities that bad actors can exploit. For example, government software systems could be compromised by a cyber attack that seeks to disable them, a denial of service attack, or by an attack that threatens the data needed for those systems to carry out their core functions. And we just heard the importance of safeguarding data in the previous presentation. Government software systems could also be compromised even in the absence of a cyber attack. In complex systems, small mistakes can trigger cascading failures that cause significant damage to the overall system, damage that can seem disproportionate to the initial trigger. For example, if a mistake ensured that a database that housed recipients' account details, bank account details, could not be accessed by Treasury's payment systems, then payments simply could not be made. Attempts to reboot that database with account details could overload or otherwise throw off other system components, causing them to fail too. Now, this is an illustrative example, but the progression of cascade failures is uncertain, and we cannot predict in advance what mistakes will trigger them and what the consequences will be as interdependent system components interact and adapt. When complex systems perform critically important functions, redundancies and other inefficiencies are often seen as a safety feature, not a bug, because they make the systems more robust, dampening the transmission mechanisms for cascade failures. But DOJ employees may seek to do away with these redundancies and efficiencies, not understanding their purpose or value. We heard in the previous presentation about the importance of COBOL programming language to our government systems. My understanding is that COBOL hasn't been taught in computer science programs since the 1990s, so it would be unlikely that DOJ's young employees would know how to navigate a COBOL system carefully. A point I want to make is that cascade failures can also flow into systems that are interoperable with a malfunctioning system, which raises potential concerns about the impacts of DOJ activities on private sector IT systems that share some level of interoperability with government systems. Now, I do not know if this kind of interoperability is common, and I'm not aware of any reporting on this issue, but this is something that private sector businesses should at least look into. Experience with the NotPetya cyber attack demonstrates that the defenses of a private sector business entity will only be as strong as those of the weakest entity its systems are interoperable with. The public will also be exposed to significant operational risks if DOJ introduces blockchain technology into government agencies. Bloomberg has reported that DOJ is considering using blockchain technology to track spending by government agencies, and ProPublica has reported that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development was contemplating using blockchain technology as a trial run for the use of that technology and cryptocurrency in other parts of the government. However, blockchain technology suffers from significant inefficiencies and scaling problems. The consensus mechanisms that are used to verify transactions on these kind of blockchains are inherently inefficient and wasteful. They have to be, by definition, or else it would be too easy, far too easy, for a bad actor to take over a system that lets anyone participate. So these kinds of blockchains cannot process large volumes of transactions. In the private sector, the delays and fees associated with these blockchains are often significant at peak times. As a result, even a fervent blockchain proponent wrote of DOJ's reported plans, "Does anyone truly believe that any one blockchain today could handle more than $5 trillion of Treasury assets?" But it's not just the scaling problem that pertains to blockchains. There are also, again, operational security problems. Blockchains are software, and like any software, they require constant monitoring and maintenance to address bugs and cybersecurity issues. But who has the economic incentive to invest time and effort in maintaining the resilience of a public permissionless blockchain? Most such blockchains rely on core software developers funded by grants and donations, but it is often unclear who they are, what powers they have, who is funding them, or how they are chosen. They are certainly not regulated. Could they be bad actors or at least have conflicts of interest? Can they always be counted on to get the blockchain up and running in a timely manner after an outage? What if their funding dries up? What if they just give up on the blockchain? Could the records hosted on that blockchain be lost forever? In short, there would be real dangers associated with using public permissionless blockchains to serve as the plumbing for any government services. In sum, DOJ employees' access to the software systems used to affect federal government payments, as well as DOJ's ambitions to substitute new blockchain-based systems as government infrastructure, may leave American citizens who rely directly or indirectly on payments from the government more vulnerable to the effects of cyber attacks and careless errors. This is in addition, of course, to concerns raised elsewhere about intentional cessation of congressionally authorized payments by DOJ employees. Many of the inefficiencies that DOGE seeks to root out are in fact protections for the American people, including redundancies in software systems designed to ensure that critical payments can continue to be made. Unfortunately, there are only very limited steps that any state or even any individual can take to protect themselves against missed payments that might result, intentionally or unintentionally, from the actions of DOGE employees. If possible, individuals should amass savings and keep some cash set aside to tide them over any temporary disruptions. They should consider keeping screenshots of balances in government accounts. They should be alert to any signs of identity theft. But the concerns that I raise here are largely systemic in scope, and so individuals really have little recourse outside of the democratic political process. Should DOGE's activities result in an operational default on United States Treasury securities, that could result in global financial catastrophe, and there's no way for individuals to protect themselves against that. I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions? Members coming? Yep. Senator Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you for testifying today, and Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing. A lot of what's been brought up is in the spirit of things that could go wrong, right? And I hear that a lot coming through, especially your testimony. This could happen if they're doing it this way. This could be a risk. I mean, of all the negative outcomes that you articulated today, how many of those have happened so far? How many negative outcomes from, down to the individual level, all the way to the end of, you're talking about global financial meltdown based on DOGE looking for efficiencies in government. Realistically, what are we looking at? Is this an exercise in trying to talk about how things could go wrong, or are we talking about actual negative feedback at this point?
Well, thank you for your question. The challenge with some of this is that it takes time for problems to metastasize into consequences. So it's quite possible, for example, that some of this information has already been exposed to nefarious actors. They may not have weaponized it yet. One of the challenges with cyber attacks, for example, is often they are low and slow, right? The groundwork is done, systems start to be corrupted, and you don't notice for quite some time. So it's really impossible to say at this point whether any of the things I'm worried about have actually already started to happen. Have the full panoply of things I've worried about started to happen? I mean, I don't think that is the case yet, but I think given the stakes of what we're dealing with, and this is a point I often make as to the difference between making a social media app and the government. It's okay to have minor mistakes when the result is that your photo doesn't show or your message doesn't get sent. When you're talking about people's livelihood, I think you need to be a little more cautious, a little more precautionary to ensure that people are able to get their payments. So if you have people who are dependent on Social Security payments, they may not be able to make it for another week another month until they get their payments. So I think a little bit of prudence and a little bit of worrying about what could go wrong is appropriate at this stage. I think some things could already have gone wrong and we wouldn't know yet.
All right, Senator McMorrow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for your testimony. You touched on it a little bit, and hearing my colleague's previous line of questioning, we have seen reporting of some of these processes result in incorrect firings of federal employees that Elon Musk, in subsequent hearings, has walked back and said that was a mistake. We are inevitably going to make mistakes in the system. To your point, the attitude of move fast and break things may work in tech, but can be incredibly damaging in government. One question that I have had from constituents, given that it's tax time, people are about to file their taxes, there is a significant amount of personal confidential information that people share in their tax filings, whether it's social security numbers, finances, debts, liabilities, and people want to know what they can do about it to protect their information. You touched on a couple of things: keep cash set aside, identity theft, monitoring. Is there anything else constituents should know in this moment as they get ready to file their taxes?
Yeah, so I mean, I am not a tax lawyer, but I share the concerns that many of your constituents have. Unfortunately, I just think this is a situation where people cannot engage in self-help. You're sort of at the mercy of whoever is administering these systems, and I think that is, a pretty scary prospect for a lot of people. But I don't have any really solid hacks here to protect yourself, unfortunately.
Ask one quick follow-up. One quick follow-up on that. I appreciate that. Could you just walk through? I know we don't want to engage in the worst, but we do have a number of constituents who are very dependent on Social Security payments, who are living on a fixed income. You touched on a little bit, but what can you walk through kind of if there is a disruption in the system or a payment, what that could mean for an individual who is dependent on these systems?
Yeah, I mean, so many years ago, I wrote a paper on payments failure, and that was not to do with government systems, but it was to do with what happens if there are, in the private sector, sort of breakdowns in the payment, in the ability to process payments, whether through a cyber attack or some kind of tech glitch. And the conclusion I came to was that problems can escalate pretty quickly if people are not able to make time-critical payments. And it's not just an issue for the individuals themselves. If you can't get your money, you can't buy food, you can't buy, you can't pay your rent, you can't buy your medications, that can become pretty disastrous for the individual affected very quickly. But collectively, if a lot of people are affected, it can metastasize into broader economic dislocation. The one analogy I drew was to the M-Pesa payment system, which is used in Kenya. And it sometimes experiences outages, and even an outage of a couple of hours sort of had a noticeable impact. I mean, not disastrous, but had a noticeable impact on GDP. So I think we can sort of infer from that even short temporary disruptions are going to be very challenging, not only for the individuals impacted, but also potentially for the broader economy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here today. As part of our conversation, I wanted to continue this conversation, but more on the cybersecurity and the attacks that we see here on a regular basis at the state level. And so at this point, I'd love to bring up our friends from DTMB, Jason Cavendish. I don't know if you're bringing up a colleague, but please come on up.
Hi, I'm Neil D'Souza. I'm the legislative liaison. I'm joining Jason just to support on this, and I'll turn it over to him for a brief intro.
Back for on, mic off.
Right. Now you're on.
Now I'm on?
Yep.
Perfect. Hi, good afternoon. Chair Singh, Majority Chair McMorrow, Minority Vice Chair McBroom, and the Oversight Committee members. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. I am Jason Cavendish. I'm a Deputy Director of DTMB and the State of Michigan's Chief Security Officer. After an initial 30-year career, first in the United States Marine Corps and then in private sector, I'm honored to have joined public service in 2019. To have been selected as the Deputy Chief Security Officer in 2021 and then as the Chief Security Officer in 2023. It's been my privilege to serve the state for the last 6 years. While there are many topics emerging at the federal level, I'd like to discuss the topic of cybersecurity and the state's posture related to data security safeguards. As the Chief Security Officer of the state of Michigan, my responsibilities are to equip and maintain the Security Operations Center and defend against threats, to help prepare new application deployments and ensuring they implement appropriate security and privacy controls, to safeguard state-managed buildings and provide video surveillance and building access systems, to provide my login single sign-on identity access management portal that provides residents and visitors to Michigan easy access to our state services. The fire alarm that was just going on is probably my Office of Infrastructure Protection teams doing to test that facilities in the Capitol area and secondary complex. These responsibilities, though, are met with ever-changing threats, and while I'm pleased to report that we are currently well prepared to meet those challenges today, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that every day brings new and creative, sophisticated, increasing cyber criminal activity. That cybercriminal activity can be categorized in two forms. One, that of nation-state actors seeking to acquire intellectual property or government secrets that empower them to conduct harmful acts to the United States and to Michigan. And two, crimes of convenience that are motivated towards monetary gains. In many cases, these two themes are not mutually exclusive. So what are we doing to protect and safeguard the state? In 2022 and 2023, DTMB senior executives revamped the DTMB strategic plan with a focus on help, connect, and solve, and focusing on that as our core tenets. DTMB has 4 technology pillars. There are other management and budget pillars, but the technology pillars are made up of the Chief Technology Officer, the Office of Chief Security Officer, that's my division, agency services, and the Center for Shared Solutions. These pillars all work collaboratively to provide services to our residents and visitors through the agencies that we support. And to ensure that DTMB IT is successfully doing so, we created 4 strategic initiatives. One is Cloud Smart, the adoption of cloud services delivering IT modernization and improved security. DevSecOps, a more efficient application delivery paradigm and cost-effective for ongoing support of applications. Digital experience, focusing on improving the overall customer experience of digital government services, and Zero Trust architecture. I'll discuss a bit more about Zero Trust architecture next, for which I am the executive sponsor. My cyber division utilizes an industry-accepted Zero Trust architecture that, number 1, assumes breach, number 2, verifies each request, and number 3, verifies that those requests are authorized appropriate access. Zero Trust architecture does not imply that we do not trust our employees, residents, or agencies. It's a mindset and a way of operating that ensures we do not take things for granted. Starting back in 2010, the notion that there are 2 kinds of organizations became popular in the security community. One of those kinds of organizations are those that have been breached. The other are the organizations that just don't know it yet. This principle, while not universal, is a good place to start when architecting a proactive response to threats. This is why the core principle of Zero Trust architecture is assume breach, and to ensure monitoring and logging of transactional telemetry data that allows for detecting anomalous behaviors is core to that architecture. That principle allows us to implement the other 2 principles with limited friction to the end user and allowing them to be verified and provided appropriate access. I want to thank the legislature for the 2021 one-time funds that enabled us to acquire tools that modernize our security practices in ways such as implementing Zero Trust architecture paradigms and the necessary and supporting processes and tools. Now, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into how does our information security defense in depth work. So that is described via the cyber kill chain model. That is a model that was developed by Lockheed Martin and the MITRE Corporation, and it's an accepted best practice to detect and disrupt cyber attacks early enough to prevent widespread damage or data loss. There are 7 defined stages of attack: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives. If we can disrupt an attack at any one of those phases, we can limit the damages that actually occur. DTMB IT pillars have appropriate security controls along with detection and prevention tools across each of these areas such that we can rely on defense in depth to identify, disrupt, delay, and thwart attacks on our networks and distributed computing assets and endpoints. I'd like to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence next. We are intentionally and thoughtfully, transparently, with ethics and fairness in mind, approaching several artificial intelligence engagements at the state. To do this, with intention, we first updated our acceptable use policy and our data classification standard, and then we created an artificial intelligence usage guide. Next, using those, we created an artificial intelligence use case intake process that is reviewed and monitored by an artificial intelligence cross-functional team. That team has 2 current activities that they're charged with. The first is implementing the most commonly requested use case for artificial intelligence, and that is for an enterprise chatbot. So when you heard earlier about the generative pre-trained transformer type technologies, ChatGPT, those kind of things, we wanted to bring that to DTMB and to the state agencies to better allow them to function. Now, the key aspect of that, though, is having the expert in the loop or the human in the loop, and that's how we maintain that transparency and fairness. So we wanted to make sure that that was one of the first things that we brought forward as an enterprise. The second thing is a broader, more robust strategy around how we wanted to embrace artificial intelligence. Finally, I'd like to speak a little bit about the cyber ecosystem and partnerships that we have and how do we help the residents of Michigan, as well as our agencies and interagency teams with regards to the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs and Michigan State Police in providing services to local units of government. First thing we have is the Michigan Secure app. It's an application that is much like some of us have on our mobile devices. We have a mobile device management platform. The Michigan Secure app is a free to download application for Michigan residents and visitors that does things like provide identification of malicious applications on their devices. It provides them the ability to identify malicious websites before they visit the website. It gives them the opportunity to identify if they're on a wireless network that is insecure, and it allows them to scan QR codes to determine the risk levels before visiting those websites. It does all this without collecting any data about those residents when they're using that device, but it does help them to protect themselves and be part of that fight that we have, all must be part of. Secondly, we have cybersecurity training for residents. All of this information is available at the michigan.gov/cybersecurity website. We call that the Cyber Resource Hub. There we are preparing training for residents at all different age levels. That's going to be released in September of this year and congruent with our Cyber Summit in October and the Cyber High School Cyber Summit, as well as the High School Cyber Challenges that happen at that same time. Additionally, we have the Michigan Cyber Corps. This is a corps of volunteer civilians that volunteer to help out when we have a county or a city or a village or a school that has a ransomware attack or an attack occur. We can send trained incident responders that are volunteering from the community in to help them recover from those attacks. And we're continuing to look for ways to be more proactive with that group so that they can go in even maybe before an attack, but known threats are imminent, and try to help take actions so that they aren't subject to an attack later. And then finally, we have the Cyber Disruption Response Plan. That's a plan that is cross-jurisdictional. It's with the Michigan State Police and the National Guard and DTMB created this plan so that if we had a wide-scale cyber attack and we needed to activate the State Emergency Operations Center, we would have cyber resources available to understand how to deal with those larger attacks. And we could bring in the National Guard to assist us. We could bring in resources from the Michigan State Police as well as the Michigan Cyber Corps that I just spoke of. So those are some of the things that we have in place and that we're doing today to try to support residents and the state of Michigan. I'm sure there's a lot more detail that I could share with you on those specific things, but for now, that's where I wanted to stop and take questions.
Yeah, let me start off with a few questions and we'll go to my colleagues. So when you take a look at the attacks that are coming on to the state of Michigan, are there a set of actors from different countries that are coming in? What are the top, nefarious actors? Where are they coming from?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So I think the answer to that is that there are 4 primary countries that are considered nation-state actors that are perpetrating, government espionage activities. That would be China, Russia, South Korea, and Iran are the primary, and North Korea. Did I say South Korea? I apologize. North Korea, not South Korea. So those are the primary countries that would be carrying out espionage. The reality, though, is that attacks come from all countries, and they come from all countries because the cyber criminal bad actors don't operate from their homes. They exploit someone else, and they operate from that location, and then they exploit another person and play kind of leapfrog until they get to a point where they think they can't be attributed back to an attack from there. So it could be very possible that most of the attacks that we see that our nation-state organization operated attacks are coming right from within the United States itself.
Sure. And then I'm sure you work with other states and partnerships to try to share information. I know that in past presentations, I've seen significant federal-state interactions. You know, recently I've seen some of the significant cuts that have been made into departments that oversee cybersecurity. Do you have concerns about, as these attacks are increasing, that perhaps the resources are decreasing at the federal level to kind of help out state and local governments?
Yeah, so the state of Michigan is able to operate independently. Like our resources that we have, we're prepared to operate without the support of, our federal government partners. But we do very much appreciate working with the FBI, the Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, and others that provide us with information. The National Institute of Standards and Technology from the Commerce Department, for example, publishes all of the standards that we leverage to build our security program from. So this SB 837 is the risk management framework. It's a document published from Commerce Department, National Institutes of Standards and Technology that allows us to build our risk treatment programs across the state. So any loss of those kind of things would have a detrimental impact. But for us directly at the state level, we are prepared to operate independent of most of those things.
All right, members? Senator McBroom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony, and I appreciate the efforts that the department puts in on these issues. However, over the last, 10 years or so that I've been really working on various state audits and things, one of the very frequent findings of the Auditor General's office is that DTMB and other departments fail to close up significant cybersecurity loopholes. It's cited again and again in multiple audits, particularly with employees who aren't with the department anymore still having access to the systems. Are these things, what are you guys doing about that? I was always shocked at how frequently that was cited as a significant security problem.
So, with the zero trust architecture that I talked about earlier, one of the primary things there is identifying the individual that's actually trying to access information, as well as ensuring that they have appropriate access to the information that they're requesting. Another aspect of that is continued audits of whether or not that access is still appropriate. And so as we move forward with our zero trust paradigm, I think some of those concerns that you're mentioning will be addressed.
Thank you. Any other questions?
May I have a follow-up, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Thank you. So by that answer, then, should I take from that those problems haven't been solved thus far? And they continue to be as rampant as they were just a few years ago?
I would say that we've taken actions previously. We continue to improve that situation. But the reality is that when resources leave state employ, there are a number of different notifications that have to occur to ensure that access is properly managed. And we're trying to continue to automate and make that more efficient than it is today. But it's very possible that if you were to leave state government tomorrow, that the number of forms that have to be filled out to get to disabling all of your accounts and ensuring that every application that you've ever had access to has had your account removed is adequate is going to take time. Does that mean that someone could take advantage of your primary account? Nope, that's probably turned off right away. What the findings that you're referring to have shown previously are that while the primary Active Directory account, which is how you log on to your laptop or desktop, is deactivated, there are applications on the network that still show you as an active user. The account's disabled, you don't have access anymore. So I think it's a continuous process of improvement. It's not something that is an easy button push.
Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge, Senator, we both have seen these audits and so forth. I've not seen somebody been able to access the information, but they are oftentimes still an eligible user. And I know that that has been an issue in some departments as we've been trying to address that. So I do think, we probably have to be better long-term in that space. But, oftentimes when the primary system is you're taken off, you don't have the access to it, even though the lever is still there with your name on it or access to it and so forth. But it is definitely an area that we need to become better at.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. I think that is primarily usually the case, but there were audits where people specifically still had long time after they left employment, just an open access port. So, thank you.
Yep. Senator Geis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I guess I have a follow-up question to Senator McBroom's question, which is, I think, so someone would have to want to try and have access after they have detached themselves from state government. So is the concern here that it exists and that it's possible that someone could impersonate another person? Because I feel like that could happen with any of us anyway. Or the timing or the time lag there. I don't think that there are people who would want to, I don't know. How do you address that issue? Then my initial question is regarding AI and those interactive like chat GPT and those bots. Where does the human interface come in? Because there are people who don't want to utilize them, and want to, especially if they're in a time of crisis, right, who want to get to a person. They don't want to have to go through 5,000 steps of having really basic, often grammatically incorrect questions asked at them and before they can get to a person.
Yeah, so I don't have a specific answer for that question about the artificial intelligence versus being able to talk to a person from a customer support perspective. The AI chatbot for the enterprise that we're working on rolling out, we're not really rolling it out yet, we're still designing and building it, is focused on resources that are already available and helping you get to those resources more quickly. None of that precludes your ability to call a phone number for direct support with the agencies that are providing those support. They all have help desks for those purposes. So that's not really what we're doing with it. With regards to having a human in the loop perspective of artificial intelligence that I discussed, though, that is a factor of, if you search the internet today on a topic, you're likely to get some correct answers and some incorrect answers. And the reality is that all of the artificial intelligence large language models that are brought to bear in the commercial market today are trained on the internet. So they don't have perfect answers. And so just like if you were just using a standard search engine and you're using these chatbots that we're trying to build, we're having quality assurance happen over the answers that they provide to try to make sure before they're turned loose on the unsuspecting public, if you will, that we're pretty sure the kind of answer that's going to happen, and they're tested and ready for that. That's the ethics, fairness, and transparency portion that I mentioned.
Just so, I appreciated, the department's focus on transparency and ethics as you look at data, the collection of data, how that's implemented. If I'm the average citizen, I wanted to learn more about that. Where do I find that sort of on the state government website and so forth?
Yeah, so the most accurate place to find information about our artificial intelligence work that we're doing is really with the procurement department and the contracts that we've issued for those. They're all publicly available.
Right. Well, I appreciate you all coming out. Any additional questions? Well, thank you for being here. And again, I think in the end, for me, the idea of ethics and transparency are key. And, as we continue to watch things unfold at the federal level, I hope that we'll see more transparency, and therefore some of the questions that might be had at this point in time are something that we can deal with. But the fact that we have systems that are currently in place in a variety of federal laws to protect our residential data, our personal data from citizens across the country, some of those are not being followed at this moment. And the fact that that is happening, will still kind of raise concerns. And I hope that we'll get more information, and hopefully Congress will ask for more information about the access of that stuff on the federal level. So I want to thank everybody for being here for today's committee hearing. We don't have any other agenda items in front of us, and so therefore we are now adjourned.